Welcome back to Munchausen's Proxy for your weekly dose of contrariness. Before we start the episode 4 spoiler review for The Last of Us, I want to start by saying I spent this episode thinking that HBO could probably have merged this episode with episode 3 and nothing important would have been lost. Take the start and end with Joel and Ellie and merge it with this episode, cutting most of Head Bitch's scenes quite a bit, as well as all of the lame jokes they decided to throw into this episode, and you have a complete episode without anything important being lost. The only thing I could think to explain them was they were in the game. The jokes, I mean. If true, we could have done without them. There were a couple of other little things that could have been cut between 3 and 4, and it could have made the runtime. Having said that, I was not nearly as irritated with this week's offerings by HBO as I was with the massive waste of time last week's episode showed itself to be. I will expound upon that later, but for now, let's get into this week's spoiler review of episode 4 of The Last of Us. We start out this week with Ellie doing a bad impersonation of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. She is messing around in front of a mirror with Frank's gun that she acquired at the end of last week's episode. The pair apparently stopped at another abandoned gas station following their decamping from the compound. Ellie goes out and we see Joel siphoning gas from abandoned cars, telling her that gas degrades over time, so they will have to stop and do that every few hours or so. Thankfully, they do not show them doing that again. My thought when I heard him say that was that what the hell do they plan on doing when they get west of the Mississippi and the pre-apocalypse human population density's thin, making cars and gas stations ever more scarce. While Joel is siphoning the gas, he tells Ellie not to stray, so she pulls out a book of very bad jokes she found somewhere, reading them aloud to Joel's dismay. As they drive along later, Ellie looks through the car's back seat area, finding a Hank Williams tape, which Joel puts in the radio, and a gay porn mag with pages stuck together. Ellie asks him why they are stuck together, making him fidget, and she laughs, throwing the mag out the window. Shortly after that, they show a herd of buffalo in a field off the road, and I wondered why the fungus only seems to target humans, at least thus far. Surely some animals' internal environments are equally conducive to host the fungus as humans. But we see no dog fungus zombies or cow fungus zombies or horse fungus zombies. While they drive, Ellie asks him how come they haven't passed any military vehicles, and Joel tells her they will pass lots, and shortly thereafter we see tanks and Humvees and trucks on the side of the road. This turns Ellie somber, despite her enthusiasm for seeing them earlier. When Joel notices her mood a bit later, he decides they have driven enough for one day and pulls off the road, driving through a field and into the trees of a forest. He cooks some food and they eat, Ellie wolfing hers down. He tells her he will sleep that night and drive all day tomorrow and the next night, and that should get them to Wyoming the day after. She asks if they can start a fire, and finally, he begins to teach her the reality of being out of the QZ by asking her why he is going to say no. When she guesses infected, he tells her no, the fungus is not that smart, and besides, they are too far out for infected. When she guesses people, he grimly nods. She asks if they will rob them in a rather nonchalant, offhanded way. He tells her they will have way more in mind than that, to which she replies, "Okay." They bed down for the night, Ellie reading a little by flashlight. She then asks him if no one will find them, and he tells her no one will find them. She turns over and goes to sleep. Later, she wakes up and he is patrolling the tree line of their camp. The next morning, she wakes up to him packing up and making coffee, the smell disgusting her, which is the only thing about her thus far that I like. Coffee is a vile concoction. Ellie navigates when they get back on the road, Joel drinking his coffee. She starts asking about Tommy, and he tells her about him, how he is a joiner. He joined the army and went off to Desert Storm, but it didn't make him feel like a hero as he thought it would. 12 years later, he and Tommy made their way to Boston with a group and met Tess. Tommy would later meet Marlene, and she convinced him to join the Fireflies to save the world. Joel calls the Fireflies delusional and says that apparently Tommy quit the Fireflies for similar reasons. He was disillusioned with the military. So Joel is going to find him. She asks him if he has no hope for the world, why does he keep going? He tells her, you keep going for family. And when she asks if she is family, he tells her she is cargo. And he promised Tess he would take her, and Tess was like family. She then asks what if he doesn't find Tommy. He tells her he will. He is persistent. Joel tells Ellie she can grab more sleep if she wants, since they started early, and she tells him she's not even tired. A little while later, predictably, she is zonked out. She wakes up as they approach an overpass near Kansas City with cars lining the road. He stops when he sees trucks are blocking the road under the overpass. He tells her to stay put and goes out to investigate. The way through under the trucks looks clear. Joel decides to detour around the overpass, hoping to pick up the road on the other side, but they wind up getting lost in Kansas City proper. Ellie shouts for him to stop, and they see the entrance to the Kansas City QZ has been breached. Fedra noticeably missing. Then a guy comes out of nowhere down the street opposite the entrance, looking wounded and asking for help. Joel tells Ellie to put her seatbelt on as he does the same. They gun it down the street, but someone on the fire escape above the guy throws a cinder block at their windshield as they drive by. Right onto a spike strip. Their tires blow and they wind up crashing through the windows of a building. The people who set up the traps start shooting at them, yelling curses. He sees a hole in the wall and tells Ellie to get in it and not to come out until he tells her to. He shoots one of the attackers and goes to hide as well. She hears another attacker enter the building and then a gunshot. Joel killed him. A third attacker busts through the door and Joel winds up wrestling with him. The attacker gets the upper hand, strangling Joel with the rifle he was carrying. Ellie sees this and pulls out her knife and gun, going to help. She sneaks up on the guy and shoots him in the back. The guy falls off Joel and starts begging for his life. Joel takes Ellie's gun and tells her to go back in the hole in the wall, killing the guy with the knife he surrendered when he started begging. Ellie finds him away into the room she was in, and they go upstairs to try and find a route out of the city before blocking the door again. As they sneak out of the building a bit later, they see a Humvee and a pickup arrive out front where they crashed, with men who are clearly not Fedra troops in them. Joel and Ellie sneak across the alley into the next building. Then we cut to a woman in a guarded building questioning an old man in a cell. She wants to know about people he was with, but he insists he has not seen them. She begins to read off a list of names, but he shakes his head no. She doesn't believe him and thinks he has seen someone named Henry Burrell. She looks at a Fedra sign in the cell listing rights and wonders if her brother was beaten to death in that very cell. The old man tells her she was wronged, but that she has gone too far and it has to stop. She fires back with, "Oh, It has to stop now, you mean? Now that you're in the cell. But before, when people were dying, it was okay. He tries to claim Fedra had a gun to his head, making him inform on his friends and neighbors. She pulls a gun out and points it at him, asking if the conditions are now suitable for him to give up the information she wants. He tries to lean on the fact that he was her doctor and delivered her at birth, saying he never gave up anything on her or her brother. She retorts that he told Henry, and Henry told Fedra. He is still in the city and she wants him. She looks like she's about to shoot him when she hears horns honking. Outside, her people are back with the bodies of the people who attacked Joel. One of her men suggests they were killed by outsiders, maybe mercs. She suggests maybe Henry has a radio and called in help. One of the attackers is still alive, but doesn't look good. She asks if he would live if he had a doctor, but the guy tending him shakes his head. She goes back inside and shoots the doctor. Then she goes back outside and speechifies, telling her people that it is Henry's work. She sends them out to find and kill whoever did this, and they start going door to door searching for the collaborators. Back with Joel and Ellie holed up in what looks like a boarded up bar. Ellie wonders who these people are because they don't look like Fedra or Fireflies. Joel tells her they are just people. Ellie sees a tall building 4 blocks away, and Joel tells her that is the building they will be shooting for as soon as they don't hear trucks moving around outside. As they sit waiting, Ellie asks if he is okay. He says he's alright and asks if she's alright. He tells her that she shouldn't have had to shoot anyone, that he knows it is hard the first time. He apologizes for her having to do that. After a long silence, she says it wasn't the first time. He hands her the gun back after making sure it is empty. He checks her grip and shows her the right way to do it. When she goes to put it in her pocket, he tells her to put it in her pack, that putting it in her pocket is a good way to shoot her ass off. He goes to take the boards off the door, pausing to tell her they will get through this. She says she knows, and they go. Back with the head bitch, and she is being told her guys found sign of them. They go upstairs in a building, and her lieutenant shows her an attic. Inside are kids' drawings and empty food cans. She tells the guy that they are out of food and Henry won't let Sam starve. She tells him to double the guard on their provisions, that he is close. He has an expression on his face that suggests the other shoe has yet to drop, and she asks what. He takes her down to the basement where they see a huge cracked crater in a basement room that is moving. She says with a worried look on her face. It starts heaving and she swears again, the two rushing out of the room, closing the door. He asks her what they are going to do, and she tells him they will deal with it after they deal with the other thing. He objects, wanting to tell the others, but she tells him after, to seal the building for now. That night, Joel boasts Ellie into a building, telling her to take a look around first. Instead, she heads right for the door to open it for him. And my first thought at this scene was that they would wind up in the building head bitch just made off limits because fungus is going to break through in the basement. My second thought, after I discarded the first one as too obvious, was that they would run into Henry and Sam, whoever they are. As they look around, he tells her that they will head up to the top floor to find a route out of the city, 45 floors up. Then he gets a look at the stairwell and says, yeah, not all the way. When Ellie asks how far, he tells her as far as he can make it. As they walk up the stairs, she asks how he knew the guy pretending to be hurt was an ambush. He replies that he has been on both sides, that it was a long time ago, but they did what they had to in order to survive. She asks him if it was him and Tess, and he replies, and the other people we were with, and my brother too. Then she asks if he killed innocent people. He doesn't answer, telling her to continue the climb upward. They stop at the 33rd floor, Joel sliding down the wall to the floor, breathing heavily. Ellie nudges him with her foot, holding out a hand and telling him to get up, calling him a lazy ass. He gets up and says he is 56 years old, calling her a little. They go find a room to sleep in, and Joel breaks some glass to spread on the floor. When Ellie asks what is he doing, he says he doesn't want someone sneaking up on them while they are sleeping. She asks if he will hear it, and he assures her he will. They bed down on some cushions. Then Joel asks what she meant earlier, that it wasn't her first time hurting someone. She tells him she doesn't want to talk about it and rolls over. He tells her that it's okay, that it isn't fair for her having to deal with all of this at her age. She asks if it gets easier when you get older, and he tells her not really. Then she tells him the reason she asked whether he could hear the glass or not was because she noticed he has a hard time hearing on his right side. She asks if it was from getting shot, and he replies that it was probably more from shooting. So if she wants to keep her hearing, she should stick to her knife. Then she tells him a diarrhea joke. They start laughing, him saying he's losing it and her agreeing. They laugh some more. Later, Ellie whisper shouts his name, trying to wake him, and he turns over to find her being covered by a black man with a gun. A kid with a gun covering him. The kid gestures for him to be quiet, and the screen goes black. So, what did I think of this week's episode? Well, it was a marked improvement over last week's, but that's not saying much. Let's start with the bad. The pace of this show is still one of the biggest things that weighs it down, in my opinion. Outside of the Kansas City gunfight, this episode was still bordering on boring. Not last week level boring, but still boring. And Bella Ramsey is still annoying. I'm starting to think at least some of that is the writing, because she was less irritating this week than in the previous 3 episodes. She's still irksome, but she was actually starting to show glimmers of actual character in this episode. I mean, besides the whole snarky asshole teenager thing she has going on. We also get a new character this week whose name was either not mentioned or I missed it. Given her actions in this episode, head bitch was what I decided on for her. And she was less than impressive as a character. Her leadership skills are less than stellar, especially considering she decided to forego doing something about a massive fungus zombie outbreak waiting to happen in the basement of that building she put off limits in favor of continuing her quest for vengeance for her dead brother. And we all know how that is going to wind up going, even if we did not see the previews for the next week's episode. Someone smart enough to overthrow a military dictatorship like Fedra should have the tactical and strategic sense to weigh the relative situations she is facing and pick the one that is an imminent danger to the entire city rather than diverting resources, all of her resources, to hunting down one guy and his deaf kid brother. This is a bad leader. Leadership that would have gotten them all slaughtered by Fedra long before she gets them all slaughtered by fungus zombies in the next episode, because she was hunting for revenge. Well, that was pretty much all I had to complain about this episode. What worked? The cinematography continues to be spectacular, of course. HBO rarely has bad-looking movies and series, and The Last of Us is no exception. The sets and locations are also very well done, creating a believable environment in which to tell this story. Probably the biggest plus in this episode is something that should have been going on for at least 2 episodes. Namely, the education of Ellie about the realities of life outside of the quarantine zone. Joel finally began to work with Ellie, explaining the real world and showing her how to survive in it, rather than lugging her around like an animated sack, or cargo, as he called her in this episode. He showed her how to get gasoline from abandoned cars. He explained why fires out in the wilderness are a bad idea. He showed her how to use the gun she procured for herself. All of that was very good stuff, and stuff I have been expecting him to do since they left the quarantine zone. Or at least since Tess blew herself up. If this story has any hope of luring me in from the cold, there has to be some kind of chemistry between Ellie and Joel. And until this episode, there wasn't. The unfortunate thing is they are finally getting it, but the story is still crawling along. And that is with them practically flying over the landscape. They were 10 miles outside of Boston at the end of last episode. And they were in the Midwest this episode, crossing the Mississippi around the end of the first third mark. Signs are that this show will pick up in the next episode, but through episode 4, I have been less than impressed and remain so. This is a slow, boring, mediocre show. Nothing about it is terrible, but not being terrible should not be the bar we set for those we choose to spend our time and money on for entertainment. And for me, always lurking in the background with this show is the knowledge that we will eventually go completely to hell when we run out of The Last of Us Part 1 game material and slide into the disaster that was The Last of Us Part 2. Naughty Dog and HBO are insane not to take the opportunity to rewrite the script on that story. But they aren't, as far as I know. And at that point, I imagine a lot of normies who are slurping this show up will be quite irritated and jump ship to something less retarded. I guess that's all I have for this episode. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure the bell icon is clicked so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. Please share the video and leave a comment or constructive criticism below. It is much appreciated and definitely helps. I think my next video will be a review of the halfway point of AMC's Mayfair Witches, a show I had hopes for when I saw the trailer for it. After all, it is an adaptation of an Anne Rice series. Until next time. Tschüss.